Alright, so continuing with the Hundertwasser building, we're moving on to the next steps. One thing that it's important to do whenever you're happy with your work is to save. And another very important thing as you're learning to explore and check out the program is the power of the undo tool. Down here, watch this. See how the line goes away? If I didn't like that, I can redo it if I'm definitely happy with it. But you can also hit Command Z or Control Z, depending on whether you're on a Mac or a PC. And so to move on with the next area of the instruction here, we're going to create a new layer because what we want to do is to leave layer 1 intact without any color at all. So I've just clicked on the new layer icon as we learned earlier. You can click and drag that underneath. So if you think about layers in terms of sheets of glass, they have transparency, and whatever is on top is going to be the highest thing viewed, and it won't be obscured by anything down below. What we're going to do is we're going to add color, and the color will trap underneath those black lines. Trapping is a term that is used for applying color underneath these lines, and you've got some wiggle room. So we made the area smaller. Now we're going to come up here under the zoom tool and watch this. If I click and drag, I'm going to select this area where I have the neat little dome, and if I hold down my space bar, I get a hand, and I can move this around just to where I want it. So the next thing we want to do is we want to come over here, and here we have the polygonal lasso tool. This is what we're going to use to make a selection. So we've learned a little bit about layers, which are very important, and selecting things in Photoshop is a very, very wonderful thing. You can use the paintbrush tool to do a lot of things, but once you learn how to use layers and create selections, you're on your way to a whole different level of how to work in Photoshop. When I click on the lasso tool, we've got some options down here. I want to use this tool. This one is more of a freeform tool where you can draw, and it really doesn't do much for me. When you have a selection, you'll notice that you have marching ants. And if you have that selection, anything you try to apply in Photoshop is only going to be within the marching ant area. So once you have a selection, if you're not happy with it, you can come up here and say deselect. And let's come back down here. And we're going to use the proper tool because this is going to make things a whole lot easier. We're going to click and connect the dots. When we use the lasso tool, we come back around to where we started from. So sometimes you may be making a very complicated selection. You want to keep in mind where you started at all times so that you can make that closed path. An open path would be an example of something that was just a straight line where it wasn't closed off. But you'll see in a minute what I mean by a closed path, and you'll notice how everything is trapping underneath the black line. Alright, now just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to go oops and make a less than skillful move there, and that's going to go outside of the black line, not trapping. So now you can see that we've got a selected area. The technical word for that selected area is defined within the marching ants. How about that? Okay, so now we've got a selection, and we are definitely down in layer 2. Very important. Okay, so we're going to come over here to our color palette, and we're going to click on the foreground tool. This brings up the color picker. You'll notice that there is a slider here which enables us to pick a hue. You can pick all kinds of different hues, and I think I'm going to go for something around here. Now, once you have the hue selected, you can come over here into this field and move your slider around, and this dot will correspond with what you're seeing up here in the new field. Okay, so that's the color that you're going to paint with. So once you have that, I think I'm going to go for right about there. I'm going to say OK. And now you'll notice the foreground color reflects that selection. So if we come down here and we use the paint bucket tool, our tolerance is set to 255. Our opacity is also set to 100%, all the way banged over. And I'm going to come in here, and you'll notice they have a little icon now that shows us a paint bucket. If I click on that, now I have used the paint bucket tool. So if we were not exactly happy with this area down here, there's a way to fix that. The wonderful thing about computers is that you can fix all kinds of things. So let's come up here, and we're going to deselect our area. Okay, so now the marching ants have gone away. We were talking about layers earlier, and one of the most effective ways of fixing things in Photoshop is to use a layer mask. This icon right here, you'll see, says Add a Layer Mask. So I'm going to click on that. You'll notice that we now have a new box here, and it's white. You'll also notice that our color palette down here is white and white. We want to make sure that we have white and black. We want black to be on top. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in here, and I've still got my brush set up, and I'm going to paint, and watch what happens as I paint over this. As I paint over it, it disappears. Look over here in the Layer Mask menu, and you'll see that I painted black. If I decided that that wasn't exactly what I wanted, and I wanted to bring some of that back, it's not gone forever as if we had used the erase tool. And that's what I like about layer masks, is that the erase tool, it's gone forever. And that's information you can't get back. But if you really wanted to bring some of that back, you can paint with white, and it will bring it back. So let's go back and just clean that up one more time. And now we have a very nice selected area. If we want to apply a texture to this area, we can Control-click on the icon itself, and you'll notice now that we have that area is still selected. There's a way we can clean that up by coming here to the polygonal lasso tool, and you'll notice that here there's a contextual menu, and we've got New. We can add to that selection, or we can subtract from that selection. So let's go in here and just take that little guy out. All right. So now we've got a clean area. If I was to make a new layer, I can put a texture into this. So I'm going to come up, I'm going to hit the new layer icon. So now we have layer 3 is up above there. We can come back to the paint bucket tool. Now you'll notice that there's two different icons here in paint, and the one on the left is going to give us a color. If we click on the one on the right, it's going to give us the option to use a pattern fill. I'm not quite sure I want to use a leopard, but some people may want to add a stony texture. There is a lot of different things in here. You can play with this and go nuts for a little while. Always remember that undo is your friend. Okay, so now we have selected a texture, and I'm going to click over here, make that go away, and you can set your opacity way down. Remember how I was talking about a watercolor brush with not a lot of paint? We can use the same thing here to our advantage now. And I'm going to click in here, and now we have a texture in our colored area. If you look here, you can see that it's about a 30% level of opacity. It's not very dark. It's not real well defined, but boy, it really makes that much more of an interesting area. So play with that for a little while and see how you do.